Welcome to Time Monk Radio Network. I'm Gemini, and we are welcoming back Susan Weed as part of our Health and Wellness series to continue our discussion of women's health. This segment will include discussions of emergence, Crohn's crowning, what's next, strong bones, hale hearts, and juicy fun. I'm looking forward to this one. This information is neither intended nor implied to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be used in place of your regular health care. All right, Susan, welcome back to Time Monk Radio Network, and we're looking forward to the last segment of our menopausal discussion.
Menopause, metamorphosis. Menopause is not just a change. It's not just something that we drop a pill or take an herb and we get through it and we don't notice. No, it's a rebirth. It's a repuberty. It's a major metamorphosis. The caterpillar takes time out, forms a chrysalis, goes into that cocoon, melts down, oh my gosh, into green goo. Hot flashes, sleeplessness, all out panic. But the goo reforms itself into a butterfly. Something is happening. We must trust ourselves. We must trust our bodies. We nourish ourselves well. We drink nourishing herbal infusions. We listen to what our body says it needs. I cannot tell you how many long-term vegetarians get to menopause and their body goes, all right, meat and meat now, and plenty of it. And of course, the vegans, the vague ones, the vegetable-eating ones, and the raw food people, well, they just, have a hard time listening to their bodies is what I find. And because of that, they feel very, very confused about how to help themselves. Starting with drinking nourishing herbal infusions is a very good way. And then really spending at least 5 minutes a day just saying to your body, what do you really need and want to eat? And allowing yourself to really pamper yourself. Silly. You remember that from PMS. Give yourself what you want. Is it chocolate? Well, chocolate is a food group of its own, and it's extremely healthy for the heart. In many places in South America, the sacred is woven. The sacred is thought to be in the fiber arts in the way that throughout the Western culture, the sacred is often painted. We have beautiful paintings or built. We have beautiful cathedrals. In the same way, in many places in South America, the sacred is woven. And in these places, the weaving, the care of the fibers is done by the women. And that work is divided between the maidens, the fertile women, the mothers, and the crones. And you can be a mother without having given biological birth. It just means your fertile years. The maidens, those who have yet to pass through puberty, get the fibers ready. They card them, they comb them, they spin them, they dye them, they roll them up into balls and get it ready. The women in their fertile years, the mothers, weave. They take the fiber that has been prepared and they weave it. And I don't want you to think that they are making like a tapestry of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. No, it is the weaving itself that is sacred. And there may be a geometric pattern, but it's not a geometric pattern because we're afraid to show the face of what is sacred, as in the Arabic world. And it's not a geometric pattern because that's how we envision the face of the sacred. But it's a geometric pattern because that's what the fibers like. That's what the weaving wants. That's what the sacredness that is the weaving is expressing itself as. When a woman gets to her menopausal years, she gets up from the loom. She no longer weaves. And she goes to the caves of the crone. And there she passes those years of her menopause, while Kundalini arises, moving up through all of her chakras, and she sorts and feels and speaks her truths. And at last, she has become that butterfly, and she returns. She returns to her family, her community, her village, her life. But she does not do the things the maiden does. She does not prepare the fibers or dye or spin them. She does not do the things the fertile women does. She does not weave. No, The postmenopausal women lay the warp threads. They lay the invisible threads which hold up the weaving and which instruct the patterning of the weaving, invisible though they are. Our cultures do not offer us any such easy division into maiden, mother, and crone. And yet we can see this as we move through menopause metamorphosis, that we want to go to those caves. We want to take that time out and to there do that sorting, do that melting down. A woman told me that she was walking along a woodland path one day, and she saw a chrysalis shaking and shaking and shaking and shaking, and she thought, there's a butterfly in there, and it's trying to get out. So she went over and she tore the chrysalis open to let the butterfly free. Now, if you know anything at all about butterflies, you know she did a horrible thing. How many horrible things do we do by good intentions? Because the butterfly would never be able to fly. The butterfly must struggle. It must work its own way out of the cocoon, out of the chrysalis, which pushes the liquid down in to the butterfly's wings and allows it then to spread those wings and fly. There is no short and easy way out. Tearing the cocoon open just means that all that has gone before is not going to come to fulfillment. So it's not all over. There are concerns. We're moving through menopause. We're turning into a butterfly. We don't exactly know how to envision ourselves except by, well, what are we told? Our bones are going to crumble out from under us. We're going to have a heart attack, and we're going to lose all interest in sex. Not much of a future to look forward to. A young man in California said to me, what's your goal in life? I said, my goal in life is to get as old as I possibly can and then die. He looked terror-stricken and he said, I'm not going to get old. I said, oh, you're going to die young? You see, if you live well and you live healthily, there is a very good likelihood that you will get old. It is your goal, isn't it? So how do we keep our bones strong? How do we keep our hearts healthy? How do we keep ourselves juicy? You, if you've been listening to these shows, could probably already answer those questions. You've heard me talk about the amazing results that women are getting who've been diagnosed even with severe osteoporosis by drinking as little as 4 quarts of infusion a week. The minerals in these infusions go magnetically into the blood. They're literally the opposite charge of the blood, and so they're sucked right into the blood, swept to the bones, and used to make the bones not just strong, but strong and flexible. Remember that study after study has found that women who take calcium supplements are twice as likely to break a bone. In the Nurses' Home Health Study going on right now in the United States, enrolled over 250,000 nurses. And we're not doing anything to them. We're just looking at them. What we have found is that nurses who are taking calcium supplements and thereby getting the amount of calcium they're supposed to get, which is 1,500 milligrams a day, and it's pretty hard to get without taking a supplement, were literally twice as likely to break a bone as nurses who were taking no supplements and getting only 800 milligrams of calcium a day from food alone. When you think that a single cup of nettle infusion can contain up to 200 milligrams of calcium, a single cup of oat straw infusion can contain up to 150 milligrams of calcium, we begin to see how drinking our nourishing herbal infusions can keep our bones strong and flexible, reverse osteoporosis, reverse osteopenia. And I remember the 91-year-old mother of one of my students, and she got her mother to start drinking these infusions. And she called me up, and she said, she won't believe this. She said, my mom was out on the patio, and she took a step backwards, and there was a low table, and it caught her at the calf, and it knocked her right on the stone patio, right on her back, kaboom, and she got her up, brushed herself off, and said, it's a good thing I've been drinking those strange herbal infusions that you've been having me do, because look at me, I'm fine. And, you know, this is exactly when I say bounce back. That's literally what I mean, that we want to be able to bounce like that. We want that flexibility in our bones. And calcium, let's face it, is a brittle mineral. It's like chalk. It snaps very easily. So we're not just getting calcium from the infusions. We're getting a whole host of other things. What I've seen in terms of women rapidly reversing osteoporosis and really getting good, strong, flexible bones is, as I've said, drinking at least 4 quarts of nourishing herbal infusion a day, but also a couple of other things. One of those is eating at least a quart of plain yogurt a week. And you don't have to eat it plain. You just have to buy it plain. You can bring it home. You can put honey in it. You can put maple syrup in it. You can put frozen fruit in it. Whatever you like, that's absolutely fine. But buy it plain, because we do not want all that added sugar that the flavored ones have. As a matter of fact, I couldn't believe this. Somebody gave me a small container of yogurt. It said honey vanilla yogurt. And I turned it around and read it, and there was no honey of any kind in it, and there was no vanilla, not even artificial vanilla in it. I was just outraged that my food supply could, be so. And of course, there's a picture of vanilla bean and honeybee on the thing as well. It's like, talk about false and misleading. So check it out. You go to buy that stuff. Be sure there's really honey and vanilla in it before you buy it. Better yet, buy it plain. Take it home, put a little vanilla extract and a little honey in it at home. You know what? You'll pay a lot less. It'll be a lot better for your health. Women who eat at least a quart of yogurt a week have 75% fewer vaginal infections and 66% fewer bladder infections. Wow. That's a great kick down in problems, and problems that are, not fun when we're in our fertile years, but can be devastating when we're postmenopausal. The active cultures in yogurt also help to promote gut flora, and once our gut flora are healthier, our bones become healthier too. We're not exactly sure what the connection is there. I think it's because active gut flora is kicking more minerals out into the bones and also keeping the pH level of the blood at a more attractive space so that we don't have to melt down the bones to do that. Now, there are a couple of things that I do tell women not to do during the meltdown phase of menopause, and that is don't have a thyroid test and don't get a bone scan. As a matter of fact, right now the whole question of getting a baseline bone scan is really being called into question. And the rules are kind of being revised to say that women probably shouldn't even begin to get a bone scan until they're in their 50s at all. And I've been saying this for decades now, because during menopause, something happens that I call bone pause, and that is that the bones simply stop absorbing nourishment. And they do this erratically through the menopausal years. If you drink in your infusions all the time, it's kind of like if you have a mutual fund and you have a little bit of money taken out of your bank account every month, then you don't have to worry about the ups and downs in the market. You're just investing at a steady rate. And this is what we're doing with our infusions. We're just going to invest in a steady rate. When the bones can absorb that, they will. When they don't, that's okay, because we're doing it at a steady rate there. So we also want to eliminate soy pretty much from our diet. And many people are quite shocked to hear me say this, because they've been led to believe that soy is exceptionally healthy food. It's not. And that it's very good for menopausal women. It's not. And that it eliminates hot flashes. It doesn't. And that one of the reasons that Japanese women live a long time and don't have menopausal problems, they do, is because they eat so much soy. They don't. So I think, for me, one of the most telling things was the state of Israel, which set a commission on soy. And this commission sat for 2 years, and they looked at every study. This is fairly recently. Should be able to find information about it at the State of Israel Public Health. And they sat for 2 years looking at every scrap of study that had been done on soy. And at the end of that time, their proclamation was that no one under the age of 18 should eat soy, and that those over the age of 18 were to be considered adults, and they could choose for themselves whether or not they should eat a food that leads to osteoporosis, leads to breast cancer, doubles your risk of Alzheimer's, and basically is not good for you. So I do eat miso and tamari, fermented soy foods, known anti-cancer foods, and the fermentation removes the difficult things in the soy. Now, in our last show, we talked a little bit about red clover and the phytoestrogens in red clover, and I linked them with the phytoestrogens in soy. In fact, red clover has all 4 classes of phytoestrogens or plant estrogens, whereas soy has only one class of phytoestrogen, and we think that this is the problem with soy. Is it true that Japanese women have less breast cancer? We're not really sure. If it is true, it's because they eat small amounts of soy before their breasts have formed. And this is kind of like eating a small amount of poison, literally. The breast tissues, which are created at puberty, are created then in the presence of the carcinogenic phytoestrogens in soy. And because of that, kind of learn how to repel carcinogenic other things like estradiol, which our own bodies make. If we give birth before the age of 20, a similar thing happens. Our breasts literally learn how to fend off cancerous events. And women who give birth in their teenage years generally are immune to breast cancer until after menopause, when their risk picks up like the rest of ours does. So linden, I promised I would tell you more about linden and its wonderful anti-inflammatory qualities because, I often talk about strong, flexible bones and how wonderful the nourishing herbal infusions are for that. And I talk about hale and healthy hearts. And we know that chocolate, 1 or 2 ounces of dark chocolate a day, is a tremendous boon to that. We also talked about motherwort being so wonderful for easing palpitations and for giving us lion-heartedness, very strong hearts. And, of course, there's hawthorn. Hawthorn berry is just such a delight. I was doing a program on hawthorn, and I kept hearing myself saying, hawthorn is for the aging heart. And when I was done with the show, I went, you are over 65. That's an aging heart. Start taking hawthorn. I'm really glad that I do. It's wonderful, wonderful herb. And also passion flower vine, tincture made from all parts of the vine or from the flowers is a wonderful remedy to help the blood pressure stay cool and loose and to help the heart as well. So we talk about bones, we talk about hearts, we've talked about sexuality, we talked about oat straw and all the wonderful things that it does. But one of the things that we also need to talk about, and it's a thing that really worries us, especially during menopause, is, am I losing it? Am I becoming senile? Do I have Alzheimer's? What's going on here? Those of you who have given birth will, I think, remember that right after you give birth, you can't remember anything at all. It's what we call the hormonal washout. When levels of hormones are changing in our brains, memory definitely suffers. Or as one woman said to me, I couldn't remember anything at all during menopause. As a matter of fact, they said that my memory was so bad that I should keep a notepad with me. I thought it was a great idea, but I can never find the notepad. So, again, remembering menopause is a passage. Menopause is a period of years. Yes, it might last 10 years, and does for most women, but it's not the rest of your life. You can't remember anything. I'll tell you, I have apprentices who are in their 20s, and they go into a room, stand there with their jaw open and go, what did I come in here for? Just like the 60 and 70 and 80-year-olds do. We all forget something fascinating. The scientific experiment in which they actually showed that passing through a doorway causes a collapse of short-term memory. If you've ever thought, wow, what happened? I knew it like before I stepped through the doorway and it's gone, that actually has been scientifically proven that does happen. And sometimes if you just step back on the other side of the doorway, you will remember it. Very interesting how our minds work there. So linden is an anti-inflammatory. What does inflammatory have to do with Alzheimer's and dementia? These are inflamed states of the brain. Remember, we talked about comfrey leaf infusion and how it has special proteins that help build up short-term memory. Well, that's one good infusion drink. But linden helps literally to take away any inflammation in the brain. And linden is such a lovely tasting herb. It's a flower, and it just tastes so sweet and flowery. What else can we tell you about linden? Linden is the world's leading cold and flu preventative as well as cold and flu curative. It has a mild antiviral effect, but it is just so soothing to the respiratory system and to the digestive system as well, the nervous system, the brain. Linden spreads its cloak of sweet fairy care over all of the tissues of our body, helping to prevent rheumatoid pain, arthritic pain, helping to quell and stave off at the pass headaches, even helping to prevent cancer, if we think of cancer as an inflammatory event. And certainly blood vessel inflammation, we know, is deeply linked to strokes and heart attacks. So by drinking a very strong and yet delicious tasting anti-inflammatory, we are striking a blow against blood vessel inflammation, against heart attack, against stroke. All that in a little flower that you can easily buy or very easily collect yourself. Again, there's YouTube of me collecting linden flowers and talking about them. And we're at a shopping mall. Most cities have a Linden Avenue, and you're right, lindens are planted on Linden Avenue, and they're also planted at shopping malls because lindens do just fine with vehicular traffic. Doesn't bother them at all, and certainly doesn't bother the flowers. The flowers are just fine to pick and to use. You can see us right there at a big mall picking a linden and talking to people about the uses of linden. Wonderful, wonderful anti-inflammatory herb. My friend Marie, who I talked about, who got the Crohn's chair, also helped me to conceptualize the idea of the Crohn's crowning. And of course, when we're being born, usually, not always, but usually the first thing that is seen is the crown of our head. And the doctor, the midwife says, the baby is crowning, the baby is crowning, and it's this crown first, this head first emergence. And I think of the butterfly, which also comes out head first. It crowns, and then it wiggles its way so that the wings are filled up and can take off. And just so, as we move out of menopause and we emerge out of it, we need to have a ceremony of Crohn's crowning to say to our community, there's an old woman I am beginning to know. I've been in my cave, and now I'm back out. And watch out. Because think about the things that postmenopausal women have done. Soon, I will have an opportunity to go out and vote. How come I can vote? Well, I've never heard anybody tell me that this story is untrue, so I'm just going to keep on thinking it's true unless somebody knows better. You know, there was that little vote in the Senate about whether or not women could have the vote, and it was tied. And there was a senator from one of the southern states. This wasn't so long ago that there weren't telephones. There was a telephone right there on his desk, and before he cast his vote, the phone rang, and it was his mother, postmenopausal woman, and she said, son, do the right thing. And he voted for us to have the vote. Postmenopausal women got us. Now, when I went to my bank and I said I wanted a mortgage, my bank was thrilled to give me a mortgage because they use federal funds. And federal funds, if you lend federal funds, you have to lend equivalent amounts of federal funds to women as well as men. Do you think this happened because a bunch of bankers got around and said, hey, we're leaving women out? No, indeed. A great group called the Owls, the Older Women's League, went to Washington and kicked the appropriate part of the anatomy until that became law. Gotten a credit card solicitation in the mail recently? I know. A bunch of them, huh? Well,
Right.
guess what? Even 20 years ago, when he died, Mrs. His name, had no credit of her own. She was not considered a credit-worthy entity. How did that change? A group of postmenopausal women called the Gray Panthers went to Washington and kicked the appropriate part of the anatomy. Watch out, world. We may take some time out. We will melt down. But when we emerge, when we come back out of our cave, the weft that we lay, and the parts of the anatomy that we kick, and the purple that we wear, will change your world. Menopause, metamorphosis. A woman turns 50 every minute in the United States.
That's fantastic, Susan. I have so enjoyed this.
I'm so glad. I've had younger women say to me, "Oh my gosh, now I want to go through menopause. Now I can hardly wait."
Well, it feels like a celebration versus what our culture has led us to believe that it is. And I like the different perspective that you're giving. And I certainly hope that all the men and women in our audience that are listening really walk away with the same feelings that I have, that this is something to be celebrated versus endured.
Exactly. And again, let me say that new Menopausal Here's the Wise Woman, and it gives you over 300 pages of specific information, specific herbs, specific doses, how to prepare them, how to find them, recipes, even how to make your own yogurt. I also, at the Wise Woman University, have a class on menopause. You can come and join the group of women there who are recasting the story of menopause. I would also like to mention that the National Women's Health Network, one of the most rigorous of the feminist groups looking at healthcare, says that bioidentical hormones are snake oil. The Food and Drug Administration has fined compounding pharmacies millions of dollars for false advertising. These hormones are not safe, and they are not natural. Menopause, metamorphosis, we don't need any hormones other than the ones our bodies are making.
I agree. That's great. And much information here to digest and listen to again. And this is an interview where we should be taking notes.
Just live it. No need to take notes. Start making your nourishing herbal infusions. Everything will unfold in beautiful green blessings from there.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you being here with us this evening at Time Monk Radio.
Thank you. Green blessings.
Thank you, Susan, for taking us on a journey through your connection to the earth and her green allies. Our next discussion will focus on the men in our lives and prostate health. The first segment in this series, Susan will discuss getting to know your prostate. On behalf of Time Monk Radio, green blessings and be well.